The morning sun streamed through the massive glass windows of O'Hare International Airport as Maya Johnson walked through the sliding doors. She checked her watch, 3 hours before her flight to London. Perfect timing. Her steps were light. Despite the early hour, fueled by excitement about her first international conference presentation, after years of hard work in the marketing world, she had finally earned this opportunity to share her insights on global digital trends. Maya had packed smart for this trip. One carry-on roller bag, the same navy blue one she'd used for countless business trips across the country. It contained everything she needed for her 5-day stay, carefully selected outfits that could mix and match, her laptop, presentation materials, and just the essential toiletries. She prided herself on being an efficient traveler. The check-in process went smoothly. Maya had already checked in online the night before, so she breezed through security with practiced ease. She even had time to grab a coffee and breakfast sandwich from one of the airport cafes. As she sat at her gate, she reviewed her presentation, notes one more time, occasionally glancing up to watch fellow travelers rushing by. 2 hours later, the gate area had filled with passengers for the London flight. Maya stood when they announced priority boarding for first-class passengers and those with elite status. As a frequent flyer who had earned gold status with the airline, she gathered her things and joined the line. The line moved steadily forward. Maya noticed the mix of travelers: business people in suits, families with excited children, couples heading for romantic getaways. Everyone seemed to be in good spirits, caught up in that particular blend of excitement and anticipation that comes with international travel. When her turn came, Maya handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a man whose name tag read Derek. His eyes flicked from her face to her roller bag and back. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that bag is too large for carry-on," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "You'll need to check it." Maya blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "Your bag," Derek said, pointing to her navy blue roller. "It's outsized for our carry-on requirements. You'll need to check it at the desk." Maya looked down at her bag, the very same one she'd traveled with dozens of times before on this same airline. "There must be some mistake," she said, keeping her voice level and professional. "I've flown with this exact bag at least 20 times this year alone. It meets all the standard carry-on dimensions." Derek's expression didn't change. "Our policy is strict about oversized bags," he insisted. "And in my judgment, that bag doesn't meet our requirements." Maya felt a flutter of frustration, but kept her composure. Years of navigating corporate America as a black woman had taught her the importance of staying calm in moments like these. "I understand policies are important," she said, "but I know this bag fits the airline's published dimensions. It's 22 by 14 by 9 inches, which is exactly what your website lists as the maximum carry-on size." "It appears larger than that to me," Derek replied, his tone becoming slightly curt. He gestured to another airline employee standing nearby. "Jeff, could you get a supervisor over here?" Maya glanced behind her, suddenly aware of the line forming. She noticed a white businessman directly behind her with a roller bag that appeared identical in size to hers, perhaps even slightly larger. Derek hadn't given his luggage a second glance. "I don't want to hold up the line," Maya said, "but I also don't want to check a bag unnecessarily, especially one with my presentation materials for the conference." "You'll have to wait for a supervisor," Derek said, then turned to the man behind Maya. "Sir, you can go ahead." The businessman stepped forward, handed his boarding pass to Derek, and walked onto the jet bridge with his roller bag. No comments, no questions, no concerns about size. Maya stepped aside, a familiar weight settling in her chest. She'd been here before, not this exact situation, but ones like it. Different rules for different people. She took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay focused on the facts. This wasn't about emotion. It was about fairness and consistency. While waiting for the supervisor, Maya observed the boarding process continuing around her. A pattern quickly became apparent. A young Asian woman was stopped about her carry-on size. An older black man was questioned about his bag. Meanwhile, several white passengers with similar or larger bags boarded without comment. Maya pulled out her phone and began making notes. Times, descriptions, estimated bag sizes. Her background in data analysis kicked in automatically. If there was a pattern here, she would document it. 10 minutes passed before a supervisor appeared. Her name tag read Patricia, and she approached with a clipboard and an air of authority. "What seems to be the problem?" Patricia asked, though her question was directed at Derek rather than Maya. "Oversized carry-on," Derek replied. "Needs to be checked." Patricia turned to Maya. "Ma'am, our carry-on policy is very strict. If the agent has determined your bag is too large, you'll need to check it." "Has he measured it?" Maya asked. "Because I have. It's exactly within your airline's published dimensions." Patricia's eyebrows raised slightly at Maya's direct question. "Our agents are trained to assess baggage visually. They don't need to measure each piece." "I understand," Maya replied. "But visual assessment seems to be applied very differently to different passengers." She nodded toward the boarding line where another white passenger, with a large roller bag and a bulging backpack, was being waved through without comment. "That gentleman's bags appear larger than mine, yet there's no issue." Patricia's expression tightened. "Every passenger is treated the same. If you want to board this flight, you'll need to check your bag. Otherwise, we can rebook you on a later flight." Maya felt her heart rate increase. This was the moment. Push back or give in. Years of similar small injustices flashed through her mind. All the time she'd let things slide because fighting wasn't worth the energy. Because she didn't want to be labeled as difficult or angry. Because she had somewhere to be and no time to challenge the unfairness. "Not today, before we continue this conversation," Maya said, her voice calm but firm. "I'd like to know the exact measurement requirements for carry-on luggage with this airline. Could you state them for me, please?" Patricia seemed taken aback by the question. "They're standard, industry sizes, 22 by 14 by 9 inches. "Thank you," Maya said with a nod. "And is there a specific reason my bag has been flagged when others of similar or larger size have not been questioned?" "As I said, our agents make visual assessments based on their training," Patricia replied, a hint of impatience entering her voice. "I see," Maya said. "And is there some way to verify whether my bag actually meets the requirements? Perhaps a measuring device of some kind?" Patricia hesitated, clearly not expecting this level of calm persistence. "We don't typically measure bags at the gate." Maya nodded again as though considering this information carefully. "That's interesting, because without measurement it seems the decision about which bags to flag might be somewhat subjective. Would you agree?" A few passengers still waiting to board had slowed their movements, clearly listening to the exchange. Patricia seemed to notice this too, her eyes darting to the small audience they were gathering. "Ma'am, we have many passengers to board," Patricia said, lowering her voice. "If you could please step aside and take your bag to be checked, I'll be happy to resolve this quickly," Maya interrupted gently. "But first, I'd like to understand why the rules seem to apply differently to me than to other passengers." She gestured toward the gate where boarding continued. "In the past 15 minutes, I've counted 7 passengers whose bags were questioned, all people of color, and I've counted 8 passengers whose bags weren't questioned at all white. That seems like a pattern worth examining, doesn't it?" Patricia's face froze. She hadn't expected data. She hadn't expected someone to be counting. A moment of silence hung between them as other passengers nearby had definitely begun to take notice of the conversation. Some had even pulled out their phones, sensing something significant was unfolding. "Let me call my manager," Patricia finally said, stepping away to make a phone call. Maya stood tall, her roller bag beside her. The battle wasn't won yet, but she had opened the door. Sometimes that was all it took. Just enough space to let the light in. While Patricia stepped away to call her manager, Maya leaned against the wall near the boarding gate. Her heart was still beating faster than normal, but her mind was clear and focused. She pulled out her phone again and continued to observe the boarding process, noting patterns with the precision that had made her successful in her career. A mother with two small children approached the gate. Her roller bag looked almost identical to Maya's, standard black with silver trim. Derek barely glanced at it as he scanned her boarding pass and waved her through. Maya added another tally to her notes. Next came an older couple, both with rolling bags and shoulder bags. They too passed through without comment. Maya noted their details. White, approximately 60s, 2 bags each. No size check. 2 businessmen followed. Then a college-aged student with a backpack nearly bursting at the seams. None were stopped. All were white. The pattern continued with crystal clarity. Maya thought about all the times in her life she'd wondered if she was imagining things, if she was being too sensitive. Those moments when treatment felt unfair, but no one else seemed to notice or care. She'd grown up hearing her parents' quiet advice. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far. As a child, she hadn't fully understood what they meant. As an adult, she lived it every day. But this time was different. This time she had data. This time she wasn't questioning her perception or second-guessing her reaction. The numbers told a story that couldn't be dismissed as imagination or oversensitivity. A young woman approached the gate. Dark-skinned with curly hair pulled back in a neat bun, professional attire suggesting she too might be traveling for business. Sure enough, Derek's eyes narrowed as he looked at her roller bag. "Ma'am, I'm afraid that bag may be too large for carry-on," he began. Maya straightened, watching closely. The young woman looked surprised. "But I just measured it before coming to the airport," she protested. "It's the standard carry-on size, Rec." Shook his head. "It appears oversized to me. You'll need to check it." The young woman looked around, clearly noticing the same thing Maya had, that other passengers with similar bags had boarded without issue. But unlike Maya, she seemed unsure how to challenge the situation. "Is there someone I can speak to about this?" she asked. "The supervisor is currently busy," Derek replied, gesturing vaguely toward where Patricia stood, still on her phone. "You can wait if you want, but the flight will be boarding completely soon." The implied threat was clear. Make a fuss and you might miss your flight entirely. The young woman's shoulders slumped slightly as she weighed her options. Maya made a decision. She walked over to the young woman, extending her hand. "Hi, I'm Maya. I'm actually waiting for the supervisor for the exact same issue. Maybe we could talk to them together." Relief washed over the woman's face. "I'm Zoe," she said, shaking Maya's hand. "Thank you. I wasn't sure what to do." "I've been keeping track of who gets stopped and who doesn't," Maya explained, showing Zoe her phone notes. "There's a clear pattern emerging." Zoe's eyes widened as she looked at Maya's data. "So it's not just in my head?" "No," Maya said firmly. "It's not in your head. It's right here in the numbers." Together they moved aside to wait for Patricia to return. As they compared travel stories, Maya learned that Zoe was a medical resident heading to a training conference in London, her first international trip for her profession. Like Maya, she'd packed carefully, making sure everything fit within airline requirements. "I can't afford to check this bag," Zoe confided. "All my presentation materials and medical equipment are in here, and I've heard horror stories about checked luggage getting lost on international flights." Maya nodded in understanding. "That's exactly my concern too, plus the principle of it all. If the rules are applied to some people and not others, that's a problem that goes beyond just today's flight." As they talked, Maya continued documenting the boarding process. 3 more people of color were stopped about their bags. 7 more white passengers walked through without comment. The numbers were becoming impossible to ignore. Patricia finally returned, accompanied by a man in a crisp uniform with a name badge that read, Thomas Gray, Gate Manager. His expression was serious as he approached Maya. "I understand there's a concern about carry-on baggage policies," he said. Maya nodded. "Yes, and now it's not just my concern." She gestured to Zoe. "My fellow passenger here has encountered the same issue. We both have standard-sized carry-ons that meet your airline's published dimensions, yet we've been singled out while numerous other passengers with identical or larger bags have boarded without question." Thomas glanced at Derek, then back to Maya. Our agents use their judgment to ensure all bags meet our requirements. With all due respect, Maya replied. Judgment seems to be applied very selectively. She held up her phone. I've been documenting the boarding process for the past 20 minutes. In that time, 17 passengers with roller bags have approached the gate. 9 were people of color and 8 were white. All 9 people of color were stopped and told their bags were too large. None of the 8 white passengers received any comment about their bags, despite several having visibly larger luggage than mine or Zoe's. Thomas's expression shifted slightly. This wasn't the typical customer complaint about a minor inconvenience or misunderstanding. This was specific, detailed, and potentially damaging. May I see these notes? He asked. Maya handed him her phone. Thomas scrolled through, his face remaining carefully neutral, but Maya noticed a muscle twitching in his jaw. Nearby passengers had definitely begun to take notice of the conversation. Some were openly watching, while others pretended to be, absorbed in their phones while clearly listening. And you say your bag meets our published dimensions? Thomas asked, handing the phone back to Maya. Absolutely, Maya confirmed. I travel frequently for work and specifically purchased this bag to comply with all major airline requirements. It's 22 by 14 by 9 inches exactly. Mine too, Zoe added. I measured it just this morning to be sure. Thomas seemed to consider his options. Maya could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes, a quick risk assessment of different possible outcomes to this situation. Do you have a measuring device we could use to verify? Maya asked, her tone helpful, rather than confrontational. That would seem the simplest way to resolve this. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. I'll have someone bring the sizer from the check-in counter. While they waited, more passengers continued to board. Maya kept track. 2 more people of color were stopped. 3 more white passengers passed through without comment. The numbers grew more damning by the minute. A young airline employee arrived, with a metal frame, the standard baggage sizer used at check-in counters. Thomas thanked him and turned to Maya and Zoe. Let's check your bags against the sizer, he said. Maya stepped forward first, lifting her navy blue roller and placing it into the metal frame. It slid in perfectly, with even a bit of room to spare. On all sides, there was no doubt, the bag was well within the airline's size requirements. As you can see, Maya said calmly, my bag fits the standard dimensions with room to spare. Zoe's bag followed with the same result, a perfect fit with space to spare. Thomas nodded slowly, the reality of the situation impossible to deny. It appears your bags do meet our size requirements, he acknowledged. Yes, Maya agreed. And now I'd like to understand why we were singled out, when our bags clearly comply with your policies. While other passengers with larger bags were allowed to board without question, the gate area had grown quieter. More people were openly watching now. Someone nearby was recording video on their phone. Another person was typing rapidly on their phone, perhaps sharing the unfolding situation on social media. Thomas straightened, his tie clearly aware of the growing audience. There appears to have been a misunderstanding, he said, his voice professionally controlled. Both of your bags are approved for carry-on. You're welcome to board with them now. Thank you, Maya said. But that doesn't address the larger issue here. This isn't just about our 2 bags. It's about a pattern of selective enforcement that we've documented over the past half hour. A few murmurs of agreement came from the gathered crowd. Someone said, I saw it too. Another voice added, been happening the whole time. Thomas lowered his voice. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. I think transparency is important right now, Maya replied, matching his professional tone but keeping her voice audible to those nearby. This isn't about causing a scene or getting special treatment. It's about ensuring that all passengers are treated equally and fairly according to the same standards. The flight announcement system chimed. Final boarding call for Flight 237 to London Heathrow. All remaining passengers please proceed to Gate 42 immediately. Thomas glanced at the gate, then back to Maya and Zoe. You should board now to avoid missing your flight. I assure you this matter will be thoroughly investigated. Maya recognized the tactic. Postpone. defer, promise future action that would likely never come. How many times had she heard similar responses throughout her life? We'll look into it. We take these concerns seriously. We'll form a committee to study the issue. Words that sounded good but led nowhere, not this time. I appreciate your assurance, Maya said, but I'd like to know what specific actions will be taken and when. As you can see from my documentation, this isn't a one-time occurrence or an isolated incident. It's a pattern that impacts certain passengers disproportionately. The final boarding call repeated over the speakers. Time was running short. Thomas looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ladies, please. Your flight is leaving. We can discuss this when you return. Zoe looked anxiously toward the gate. Maya, maybe we should... One moment, Maya said softly to Zoe, then turned back to Thomas. I understand we need to board, but I want to be clear that this conversation isn't over. When we land in London, I'll be contacting your corporate office with my documentation. I expect this to be addressed seriously, not dismissed or forgotten. Thomas nodded stiffly. I understand. You have my word that I'll personally review the boarding procedures at this gate. Maya knew it wasn't enough, but the clock had run out. She nodded and picked up her bag and gestured for Zoe to join her. As they walked toward the gate, several passengers nodded in support or whispered words of encouragement. Derek avoided eye contact as they handed him their boarding passes. His face was tight, with suppressed emotion, anger, embarrassment, or perhaps both. As they walked down the jet bridge, Zoe turned to Maya. That was amazing. I never would have had the courage to stand up like that on my own. Maya smiled. Sometimes all it takes is knowing you're not alone, and having the data to back up what you already know in your heart to be true. They found their seats on the plane, stowing their perfectly regulation-sized bags in the overhead compartments. As Maya buckled her seatbelt, she knew that boarding the plane wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The plane hummed with pre-takeoff energy as Maya settled into her window seat. Her mind was still racing through what had just happened at the gate. Part of her felt a rush of satisfaction. She had stood her ground, gathered evidence, and refused to be treated unfairly. Another part felt a familiar weariness. How many times would she have to fight these small battles throughout her life? As if sensing her thoughts, Zoe leaned across the aisle. I can't stop thinking about what happened back there, she said quietly. Me neither, Maya admitted. Do you really think anything will change because of it? Zoe asked. It was the question Maya had been asking herself. Would anything actually change? Or would their complaints be filed away and forgotten like so many others before? I don't know, Maya answered honestly. But I do know that staying quiet guarantees nothing changes. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and both women turned their attention forward. But Maya's mind kept working. This wasn't just about two passengers having a disagreement with airline staff. The pattern she'd documented suggested something systematic, a bias that might be unconscious but was certainly real. Maya reached for her phone to check the time and realized she still had her notes open. She scrolled through them again, the evidence even more striking now that she reviewed it all together. In the span of 30 minutes, she had documented 25 passengers with similar carry-on luggage. 14 were people of color, all of whom had been stopped and questioned about their bag size. 11 were white, none of whom had received any comment about their luggage. The numbers were too stark to be coincidence. Maya took a screenshot of her notes and sent it to her own email as a backup. Then, making a decision, she opened her laptop as soon as the plane reached cruising altitude. What are you working on? Zoe asked, noticing Maya's focused expression. I'm organizing my observations, Maya explained. If I'm going to raise this issue with the airline's corporate office, I want to present it clearly and professionally. Can I help? Zoe offered. I'm pretty good with data visualization from my medical research. Maya smiled gratefully. That would be amazing. For the next hour, as the plane soared over the Atlantic, the two women worked side by side. Maya transferred her raw notes into a spreadsheet, creating categories for passenger description, bag, type whether they were stopped, and comments from airline staff. Zoe helped transform the spreadsheet into simple but powerful charts that showed the clear disparity in treatment. "This is even more striking when you see it visually," Zoe remarked, looking at a bar graph showing 100% of white passengers cleared versus 0% of passengers of color. "It leaves very little room for alternative explanations," Maya agreed. "A flight?" Attendant paused by their seats. "That looks like serious work for a transatlantic flight," she commented with a friendly smile. Maya hesitated, unsure how much to share, but Zoe jumped in. "We had an interesting experience at the gate," she explained. "Both of us were told our carry-ons were too large, but when we measured them, they fit perfectly. We noticed it seemed to be happening to certain passengers, but not others." "The flight." Attendant's smile faded slightly. "At this gate specifically, or Gate 42, Maya confirmed. "We documented the pattern." The flight attendant glanced around to ensure no other crew members were nearby, then lowered her voice. "I've heard similar concerns before, actually, not just at that gate or with that airline, but at several major airports. There's been talk among flight crews about inconsistent enforcement of baggage policies." Maya felt a surge of validation. "Has anything been done about it?" The flight attendant shrugged. "Not that I've seen. Most passengers just check their bags rather than risk missing their flights. It's hard to prove a pattern when each incident seems isolated. But we have proof," Zoe said, turning her laptop screen to show the charts. The flight attendant studied them for a moment, her expression growing more serious. "You should definitely send this to corporate, but also..." "Also what?" Maya prompted. When the woman hesitated, "Consider sharing it more widely," the flight attendant suggested. "Sometimes companies only address these issues when they become public. I've seen it happen before." She moved on to serve other passengers, leaving Maya and Zoe to consider her words. "She's right," Zoe said after a moment. "Data like this is powerful, but only if people see it." Maya nodded slowly. She hadn't planned on turning this into a public campaign. She was heading to London for an important professional conference, not to become an activist. But the evidence was too clear to ignore, and the issue too important to let slide. "I have a decent following on social media for my marketing work," she said thoughtfully. "I could share our findings there. And I can share it with some medical colleagues who've had similar experiences," Zoe added. "There's a whole network of professionals of color who travel regularly for conferences. Many of them have stories just like ours." They spent the next hour crafting a carefully worded post. Maya was conscious of keeping the tone professional and fact-based, focusing on the data rather than accusations or emotions. The goal wasn't to shame individual employees, but to highlight a systemic issue that needed addressing. "How's this?" Maya asked, showing Zoe her draft. The post read, "Today at O'Hare Airport, my carry-on bag was flagged as oversized despite meeting all published airline dimensions. When measured, it fit perfectly in the airline's own sizer. During the 30 minutes I waited for resolution, I documented a concerning pattern. 14 passengers of color, including myself, were stopped about bag size, while 11 white passengers with similar or larger bags boarded without comment. This isn't about one incident or one employee. It's about consistent patterns that impact travelers unequally. I'm sharing this data in hopes that airlines will review their training and enforcement procedures to ensure all passengers are treated fairly. Travel while black. Data don't lie." She had attached the chart Zoe had created with all identifying details of individual passengers removed. "It's perfect," Zoe said. "Factual, clear, and focused on improvement rather than blame." Maya took a deep breath and hit post. Within minutes, the notifications began rolling in. Comments, shares, and messages of support from people who had experienced similar situations. "It's resonating with people," Zoe observed, watching the post's reach grow. "It's validating," Maya agreed. "So many people have these experiences but doubt themselves or stay quiet because they don't have proof." By the time the flight attendants began serving dinner, Maya's post had been shared over 200 times. A few journalists had even reached out asking for interviews. The story was spreading faster than she had anticipated. "You know, Zoe said as they ate their airline meals. What happened today is part of something bigger. It's one example of what researchers call everyday discrimination. Those small interactions that might seem minor in isolation, but add up to create very different lived experiences. Maya nodded. My grandmother used to call it death by 1,000 cuts. Each individual instance seems too small to fight against, but together they take a serious toll. Exactly, Zoe agreed. And in healthcare, we're increasingly recognizing how these accumulated experiences contribute to stress and even physical health outcomes. That's what makes data so important, Maya said. It transforms individual experiences into patterns that can't be dismissed. As the cabin lights dimmed for the overnight portion of the flight, Maya reclined her seat and tried to rest. But her mind kept returning to what would happen when they landed. Would the airline respond? Would anything change? Or would this be just another complaint filed away and forgotten? Her phone pinged with a notification. The airline had sent her a direct message on social media. With a mix of anticipation and wariness, she opened it. Ms. Johnson, we've become aware of your recent post regarding your experience at O'Hare Airport. We take these concerns very seriously and would like to connect with you directly to discuss the matter further. Our customer relations director will be reaching out via email shortly. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. It was a standard corporate response, carefully worded to acknowledge without admitting anything, but it was a response which was more than she had expected so quickly. She showed the message to Zoe, who raised her eyebrows. That was fast. Your post must be getting serious attention. Let's see if they follow through, Maya said, trying to temper her expectations. She checked her email and found a message from Diane Reynolds, Director of Customer Relations, already waiting for her. Of course, the email was more substantive than the social media response. Dear Ms. Johnson, I've reviewed your social media post regarding the inconsistent enforcement of carry-on baggage policies you experienced at O'Hare today. First, please accept my sincere apology for the frustration and inconvenience this caused you and other passengers. The data you've collected raises significant concerns that we are taking very seriously. I'd like to speak with you directly about this matter at your earliest convenience. We're initiating an immediate review of our gate procedures, and your insights would be invaluable to this process. Please let me know when you might be available for a call after you've arrived in London. In the meantime, I've arranged for a full refund of your ticket as a small gesture of goodwill. Sincerely, Diane Reynolds. Maya read the email twice, a bit stunned by the quick and seemingly genuine response. That's not what I expected, she admitted to Zoe. They're worried, Zoe observed. Your post is probably gaining traction, and they want to get ahead of it. Maybe, Maya agreed. But I'll take a genuine effort to address the issue, whatever the motivation, she replied to the email, thanking Diane for her response and agreeing to speak after she arrived in London. Then she set her phone aside and closed her eyes, finally feeling some of the tension leave her body. Whatever happened. Next, she had done something important today. She had stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been in a similar situation without the tools or confidence to challenge it. She had transformed an individual frustration into a documented pattern that couldn't be easily dismissed. As the plane carried her across the ocean, Maya knew that the most powerful weapon against everyday injustice wasn't anger or accusations. It was evidence. Cold, clear, undeniable evidence that forced people to confront realities they might otherwise ignore or deny. And she had that evidence in her hands. Maya woke as sunlight streamed through the airplane window. For a moment, she was disoriented. The cramped seat, the hum of engines, the taste of recycled air. Then it all came rushing back. The confrontation at the gate, the data she'd collected, the social media post that was now spreading far beyond what she'd expected. She checked her phone and was immediately overwhelmed by notifications. Her post had been shared thousands of times overnight. Several major news outlets had tagged her in their own posts, requesting comments or interviews. A travel advocacy group had reached out offering legal support if she needed it, and dozens of people had sent messages sharing their own similar experiences. Morning, Zoe said from across the aisle, also checking her phone. Your post went viral while we slept. Maya nodded, still scrolling through the flood of messages. I never expected this much attention. People connect with it because it's so common, Zoe said. But you did something most people don't. You documented it with actual data. The pilot announced their final approach to Heathrow. Maya put her phone away and watched London come into view below, her first time seeing the city. She should have been excited about the conference, about presenting her work to international colleagues. Instead, her mind was consumed by what had happened at O'Hare and the unexpected wave of attention it had generated. As they taxied to the gate, Zoe reached across the aisle to touch Maya's arm. Whatever comes next, you did something important yesterday. You stood up not just for yourself, but for all of us who face these small injustices every day. Maya smiled, grateful for the unexpected friendship that had formed. Thanks for backing me up. It made all the difference. That's how change happens, Zoe replied. One person speaks up, then another joins them, and suddenly it's a conversation that can't be ignored. They exchanged contact information before disembarking, promising to meet for coffee during the conference. As Maya made her way through Heathrow's vast terminals, she was struck by the contrast with her departure experience. Here, no one questioned her roller bag. No one gave it a second glance. It was exactly the same size it had been in Chicago, but the treatment was entirely different. At her hotel, after a quick shower to wash away the travel fatigue, Maya sat down to deal with the situation that had followed her across the Atlantic. She had emails to answer, decisions to make about interview requests, and a scheduled call with Diane Reynolds from the airline's customer relations department. When her phone rang precisely at the arranged time, Maya took a deep breath and answered, professionally. Maya Johnson speaking. Ms. Johnson, this is Diane Reynolds from Global Airways. Thank you for making time to speak with me during your trip. The woman's voice was warm and seemed genuinely concerned, which wasn't what Maya had expected from a corporate damage control call. I appreciate you reaching out so quickly, Maya replied. First, let me say again how sorry I am for your experience at O'Hare, Diane began. I've reviewed the data you shared, and I've also spoken with our gate management team. The pattern you documented is deeply troubling and completely inconsistent with our company values and policies. Maya had prepared for defensiveness or minimization, the typical responses when issues of bias were raised. Diane's straightforward acknowledgement caught her off guard. I appreciate your willingness to take this seriously, she said carefully. We are taking it very seriously, Diane confirmed. In fact, your post has prompted an emergency meeting of our executive leadership team this morning. Our CEO has asked me to extend an invitation to you. An invitation? Maya repeated, confused. Yes. We're implementing immediate changes to our gate procedures based on your documentation, but we'd like to go further. When you return to Chicago, our CEO would like to meet with you to discuss how we can improve our training and policies. Your background in data analysis and marketing gives you a unique perspective that could be valuable to us. Maya was silent for a moment, processing this unexpected turn. You want my input on your policies? Exactly, Diane confirmed. This isn't just about addressing one incident. The data you collected suggests a systemic issue that requires a systemic solution. We'd like your help in designing that solution. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. By the end, Maya had agreed to meet with the airline's executive team upon her return to Chicago. Diane had also arranged for Maya to be upgraded to first class for her return flight and had extended an offer to cover her hotel expenses in London as a gesture of goodwill. When the call ended, Maya sat back, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The airline's response was far more positive than she had dared to hope, but was it genuine or just efficient damage control? Her phone pinged with a new email notification, a detailed follow-up from Diane outlining the immediate changes being implemented at all Global Airways gates, standardized measurement of any bag questioned for size, required documentation of all baggage decisions by gate agents, and a new data tracking system to monitor patterns in enforcement. It seemed sincere. More importantly, it seemed effective, addressing the systemic nature of the problem rather than just punishing individual employees. Maya turned her attention to the other messages, waiting for her response. A producer from a national morning show wanted her to appear via satellite link the next day. A travel magazine wanted to feature her story in their next issue. A tech blog was interested in her use of data to document bias, and dozens of travelers had shared their own experiences, thanking her for giving voice to a common frustration. She replied to the most pressing messages, then set her phone aside and opened her laptop to review her conference presentation. She had come to London for a professional purpose, and she needed to refocus on that. But as she worked through her slides, a new idea began to form. Her presentation was about digital marketing strategies, but the principles she discussed, data collection, pattern recognition, compelling visualization, were exactly what she had used to document her experience at the airport. On impulse, she opened a new slide deck and began working on a different presentation, one about using data to document everyday experiences of bias and discrimination. She wasn't sure yet where or when she would deliver it, but the ideas flowed easily, energized by her recent experience. Hours later, her hotel phone rang. It was the concierge. "Ms. Johnson, there's a delivery for you in the lobby." Curious, Maya went downstairs to find a beautiful flower arrangement with a card from Global Airways. "With our sincere apologies and gratitude for helping us become better." The executive team. The gesture was nice, but the real test would be whether the promised changes were implemented and sustained. Back in her room, Maya finally turned on the television and was stunned to see her own social media post featured on an international news channel. The anchor was discussing how one passenger's documentation of bias had prompted an airline to announce new training and policy changes. "This story continues to gain traction on social media," the anchor said, "with the hashtag #YourData.lie now trending globally as travelers share similar experiences." Maya sat on the edge of the bed, watching in disbelief as her personal experience was transformed into a much larger conversation about bias, accountability, and the power of documentation. This wasn't what she had planned when she'd packed her carry-on for a business trip to London. She had simply wanted to be treated fairly, to have the same rules applied to her as to everyone else. Her phone rang again. This time it was Zoe. "Are you seeing this?" Zoe asked excitedly. "You're on the news, and not just here, it's on stations back home too." "It's surreal," Maya admitted. "I never intended for any of this to happen." "That's often how the most important changes start," Zoe said. "Not with grand plans, but with one person simply saying, 'enough,' and having the tools to back it up." After they hung up, Maya opened her laptop again and returned to the new presentation she'd been working on. The title slide now read, "Data as Testimony, Using Analytics to Document Everyday Experiences." As she worked late into the evening, Maya reflected on how quickly life could change direction. She had boarded a plane as a marketing executive heading to a professional conference. Now, barely 24 hours later, she was at the center of a growing conversation about bias and accountability. Her professional skills, data analysis, pattern recognition, clear communication, had given her the tools to transform a personal frustration into powerful evidence. Her background in marketing had helped her craft a message that resonated widely and prompted actual change. The next morning, Maya did the satellite interview with the national morning show. The hosts were respectful and seemed genuinely interested in the methodology she'd used to document the pattern. "What would you say to other travelers who experience similar treatment?" one host asked. "Trust your perceptions," Maya replied, looking directly into the camera. "If something feels wrong, it probably is, and if you can, document it. Data transforms individual experiences into patterns that can't be easily dismissed." "And what about the airline's response? Are you satisfied with their actions so far?" Maya considered her answer carefully. "I'm cautiously optimistic. They've committed to specific policy changes that address the systemic nature of the problem. The real test will be whether those changes are implemented consistently and sustained over time." "Would you fly with them again?" the host pressed. "Yes," Maya said without hesitation. "An organization that acknowledges problems and takes concrete steps to address them deserves another chance. That's how progress happens. not by punishing mistakes but by using them as opportunities for meaningful change. After the interview ended, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "Thank you for your grace and honesty. You've helped us see a blind spot in our organization. TR CEO Global Airways." Maya smiled slightly, tucking her phone away. She had a conference presentation to deliver in 2 hours. That was her immediate priority. The unexpected journey that had begun with a confrontation at an airport gate would continue when she returned home. For now, she was simply a professional woman with a perfectly regulation-sized carry-on bag, preparing to share her expertise with colleagues from around the world. But she knew that something fundamental had shifted. She had transformed from someone who experienced bias to someone who documented it, from someone who felt frustration to someone who sparked change. The power had been within her all along, in her skills, her precision, her willingness to stand firm. All she had needed was the courage to use it. 3 months had passed since Maya's flight to London. The summer heat had given way to autumn crispness in Chicago, and Maya found herself back at O'Hare Airport, this time heading to Atlanta for a marketing conference. As she walked through the familiar terminal, she couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that fateful day. Her presentation at the London conference had gone well, earning praise from international colleagues and leading to several promising professional connections. But it was her unplanned second presentation, the one about using data to document everyday bias, that had truly resonated. Delivered at an impromptu evening session organized by conference attendees who had heard about her airport experience, it had sparked intense discussion and led to invitations to speak at several other events. Maya approached the security checkpoint, roller bag in tow. The same navy blue bag that had caused such controversy 3 months ago now rolled smoothly behind her, drawing no special attention. She noticed a new sign prominently displayed near the TSA area. All baggage policies are consistently enforced. For all passengers. Questions? Ask to speak with a supervisor. It was a small change but meaningful, a public commitment to equal treatment and transparency. Maya knew it was just one of many changes implemented by Global Airways following her viral post. The meeting with the airline's executive team upon her return from London had been surprisingly productive. They had listened intently as she walked them through her documentation process and the patterns she had observed. Rather than becoming defensive, they had asked thoughtful questions and taken copious notes. The CEO, Thomas Reynolds, had been particularly engaged. "What you've shown us isn't just an issue of customer service," he had said. "It's a blind spot in our entire approach to training and evaluation. We measure on-time departures and baggage handling efficiency, but we've never tracked consistency in how our policies are applied across different passenger demographics." That conversation had led to Maya being hired as a consultant to help design new training protocols and evaluation metrics for the airline. It was work she found unexpectedly fulfilling, using her data and marketing skills to create meaningful change within a major corporation. As she passed through security and headed toward her gate, Maya noticed other subtle differences in the O'Hare airport environment. The baggage sizers, those metal frames used to check whether carry-ons met dimensional requirements, were now positioned prominently at every gate, with clear signage about the exact measurements allowed. Gate agents had standardized tools for measuring any bag that was questioned, and Maya knew from her consulting work that they were now required to document every instance where a passenger was asked to check a bag that they had intended to carry. More importantly, those documentation records were regularly reviewed for patterns that might suggest bias, whether conscious or unconscious. The data didn't lie, and now it was being collected systematically rather than by individual passengers who happened to have the skills and courage to document their experiences. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, who had become a good friend since their shared experience. "Guess what? Just got through security at JFK with my oversized bag. No questions, no problems. Your work is making a difference," Maya smiled. These small victories, everyday experiences of equal treatment, were what mattered most. The media attention had faded, as it inevitably did, but the structural changes remained. At her gate, Maya noticed a familiar face. Patricia, the supervisor who had initially backed Derek's claim that Maya's bag was too large. Patricia was now training a new gate agent, demonstrating the proper use of the measuring tool and explaining the documentation process. Their eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, Patricia approached. "Miss Johnson," she said, extending her hand. "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." "I remember," Maya replied, accepting the handshake. Patricia's expression was earnest. "I wanted to thank you, actually. What happened that day? It made me examine a lot of assumptions I hadn't even realized I was making. The training program you helped design has changed how we approach our work." Maya nodded, appreciating the woman's honesty. "I'm glad to hear that. The goal was never about pointing fingers at individuals. It was about recognizing and correcting patterns that impact people unequally." "I understand that now," Patricia said. "And I've become much more aware of how those patterns show up in small decisions we make every day." She glanced at her trainee who was assisting a passenger. "I make sure everyone I train understands that too." They chatted briefly about the changes at the airport before Patricia needed to return to her duties. As Maya watched her walk away, she reflected on how a confrontational moment had transformed into an opportunity for growth, not just for a corporation, but for the individuals within it. Her phone rang. It was her agent. Yes, Maya now had an agent to help manage the speaking requests that had come flooding in after her story went viral. What had begun as a simple social media post documenting bias had expanded into a platform for discussing how data could be used as a tool for social change. "Great news," her agent said. "The tech conference in San Francisco is confirmed for January, and they're offering your full speaking fee. They want you to talk about data as testimony, your methodology for documenting everyday experiences." "That's wonderful," Maya replied. "Send me the details and I'll block it on my calendar." After hanging up, Maya checked her email and found a message from the Global Airways PR team. They wanted her approval on a case study they were planning to publish about the company's transformed approach to training and evaluation. They were calling it "From Bias to Balance: How One Passenger's Data Changed Our Company Culture." It was surreal to think that her impromptu documentation of gate procedures had catalyzed such widespread changes. Maya Hui always believed in the power of data. It was fundamental to her work in marketing, but she had never expected to apply those skills to addressing social issues. The boarding process for her flight to Atlanta began, and Maya watched with professional interest. The gate agent was methodical, consistent, and transparent. When one passenger's bag was questioned, it was measured using the standardized tool, and the agent clearly explained the reason for concern. There was no pattern to who was stopped and who wasn't, just consistent application of the stated policies. This was how it should be. This was what equal treatment looked like in practice. Not special allowances or exceptions, but the same rules applied the same way to everyone. As Maya settled into her seat on the plane, she opened her laptop to review her presentation for the Atlanta conference. Her professional work was still focused on digital marketing strategies, but her perspective had been enriched by her unexpected journey into corporate consulting on bias and evaluation metrics. The flight attendant stopped by her seat. "Ms. Johnson, the captain asked me to give you this." She handed Maya a handwritten note. "Thank you for making us better. Your work has improved not just our airline, but the industry. Captain Michael Chen, Global Airways." Maya tucked the note into her laptop case, touched by the gesture. She hadn't set out to become an advocate or consultant on bias in corporate settings. She had simply wanted to be treated fairly and had the skills to document when that didn't happen. But the ripple effects continued to spread. Beyond the airline industry, other companies had begun reaching out to learn about the evaluation metrics and training protocols she had helped develop. A tech firm was interested in creating software that would help businesses identify potential bias in customer interactions. A retail chain wanted to apply similar data collection methods to their stores. As the plane took off, Maya gazed out the window at Chicago receding below. She thought about all the passengers who had come before her, those who had experienced similar treatment but lacked the tools, platform, or energy to challenge it. those who had swallowed their frustration and checked their bags rather than risk missing their flights, those who had wondered if they were imagining things or being too sensitive. Her story had resonated because it was their story too. And the data had mattered because it transformed isolated incidents into visible patterns that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The pilot announced they had reached cruising altitude, and Maya opened her notebook to jot down ideas for her next presentation. She was thinking beyond just documenting bias now. She was interested in creating tools and frameworks that would help organizations evaluate themselves proactively before problems emerged on social media or in viral posts. The title at the top of her page read, Proactive Equity, Using Data to Create Consistently Fair Experiences. Maya smiled to herself. 3 months ago, she had been just another passenger frustrated by inconsistent treatment at an airport gate. Now she was helping to reshape how companies thought about equity and consistency in their customer interactions. All because she had refused to accept the dismissal of her concerns. All because she had used her professional skills to document what she knew to be true. All because she had transformed a personal frustration into compelling evidence that sparked meaningful change. The flight attendant stopped by with a beverage cart. "What can I get for you?" "Just water, please," Maya replied. "Nice bag, by the way," the flight attendant commented, nodding toward Maya's navy blue roller in the overhead bin. "Looks like the perfect carry-on size." Maya laughed softly. "Yes," she agreed. "It always has been." As the plane carried her toward Atlanta, Maya reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 3 months. Her career had taken a new direction, expanding beyond traditional marketing into this emerging space where data analysis met social advocacy. Her network had grown to include corporate executives, policy experts, and fellow travelers who had experienced similar situations. But most importantly, she had discovered a powerful truth, that the skills we use in our professional lives can become tools for creating change in the world around us. That documentation transforms isolated experiences into undeniable patterns. That evidence speaks a language that even the most reluctant listeners must eventually acknowledge. Maya opened her presentation notes again, adding a new slide to her deck. The most powerful response to bias isn't anger, it's evidence. The plane soared on through clear autumn skies, carrying not just a passenger with a regulation-sized carry-on, but a woman who had learned that sometimes the most important journeys begin with simply standing your ground and saying, "Prove it, measure it, show me the data." And when the data tells a story that needs to be heard, the world eventually listens.